Welcome to A Tale of Two Scribes. I'm your host, Eric P. Bishop. This is a podcast where interesting people come and tell about the stories they've crafted. As for myself, I'm an author. I've created novels, short stories, novellas, and even poetry. If you'd like to find out more about what I've done, please go to my website, ericpbishop.com. Thanks, and enjoy the journey. Welcome back to another episode of A Tale of Two Scribes. And tonight, I'm pleased to have Charles Hack with us. Hey, Charles, how are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for the invitation. Excited to be able to talk to you again.
Yeah, looking forward to discussing your journey. Looking forward to discussing the fact of, and I love to have people on that don't just do nothing against doing one genre, but I love to get that creativity, and especially we'll talk about it of writing in multiple genres. And also, you do writing for your, we'll call it your day job. For
Yeah.
what you do when you're not writing novels, you also do more writing. So we're going to talk about that. So, but no, thanks for coming on. Appreciate, and it's been an honor to get to know you. And we're going to dive in. So let's talk about, to start with, what got you into the point where you wanted to actually sit down and do the crazy thing, which is write a novel. What got you there?
Yeah. Oh, that's a great question. I mean, doesn't everybody say they want to write a novel? They're going to write a book.
Yes.
For, for me, it really was the influence of fantastic books that I was reading. I mean, I was really influenced heavily as a teenager from books like Clive Cussler,
Yep.
the Dirk Pitt novels. My dad had introduced me to those. So I had a love for reading. When I got into college, I was still reading. I was a electrical engineering student,
Hmm.
and some of my downtime I would read. And so guys like Clancy, Vince Flynn, and all that. So it was the reading that created a desire to tell stories. And I think it was because I was reading so much. It just
Hmm.
was kind of, at some point, it's kind of bubbles out of you. So I would say that was the thing that got me to it. And it's never really been in my mind like oh man, I want to spend my entire life only writing, like as a career kind of
Right.
thing. But it was always, I want to tell stories. I want to write great books.
Hmm.
And whatever happens with those is what happens.
Okay. No, did you write like in high school or anything, or did you start like, I mean, you have to write papers obviously in school and college, but did anything start earlier than that, or it was really later?
Yeah, not really. I don't remember writing much of anything in high school, to tell you the truth. It's funny. As you asked that question, I'm like, boy, did I even write any term papers? I don't
Who
even know.
who did I
Um,
pay to write my term papers? Hold on, I don't. What was
yeah,
his name? I don't
gosh,
remember his name.
it's funny. I can't remember. It's so far back now. I'm sure I wrote something. I mean, and computers were kind of new back
Yeah.
then. I'm a few years older than you, I think, and computers were exciting. And um, but it wasn't even in college. We did do writing in college, but again, it
Hmm.
was it was really just minor stuff.
Right.
Um, it was kind of I would say just a cold, fresh thing to sit down and, let's say, age-wise, I was probably 20, 26, 25, 26 years old or so.
Okay.
Married, had a little baby. My daughter was a little baby, and I would get up and write before going to work. And
Hmm.
and it really was just sit down and start doing stuff and trying to draw. I really started with short stories, and
Hmm.
I was enjoying writing like scenes and sequences. Like I would visualize something and I would write a short story about just a action sequence or a interesting twist of something. I have one that I still really enjoy. It was one of the first ones I wrote about a couple mobsters in a hotel room waiting for this guy, and they're about ready to, like, the one guy's about to murder him when he shows up. He's so mad. And it turns out it was just the pizza delivery guy. And it was just kind of a fun, like little 10 page. It's all about the
Right.
conversation and stuff. And so trying to do that and just having fun learning how to put words together into story form
Hmm.
without really any training. I mean, I'll be the first to admit I am terrible with grammar. And
You
yeah.
too? What do you know? We should be writers then.
Yeah. Hey, you can be bad at grammar and write a book. That's a thing, actually.
Guarantee that. Guarantee that.
Yeah. Now, whether it's any good or not, it's a whole nother thing. But yeah, you can do it. Yeah. So for me, it was like fresh and new, and because I read so much, I
Mhm.
had visuals of like how dialogue looked on the
Gotcha.
page and how paragraphs were, how big they were, and what the
Mhm.
um, sort of flow of a page. And different authors, one of the most impactful for me, which really blew my mind and might have been the last straw that pushed me into actually wanting to write, was Lee Child.
Hmm.
When the early Jack Reacher books came out, and the way he writes, so choppy, the whole like, Reacher said nothing stuff in his books,
Right.
very unique way of writing, short sentences. And I was just blown away by the a thriller book with a voice that was so recognizable.
Mhm.
Um, and I could see it on the page. So that was something that really was the beginning of trying to figure out how to write.
So let's cut away from that real quick. We'll go back to the writing, but since you brought up Lee Child and Reacher, and our audience might be interested in this as well. What have you watched the Amazon series? You have.
We watched the first season.
Okay, you've
I
seen
have
season
not
one.
watched the second season.
Okay.
Yep.
And had you seen the movies with Tom Cruise?
I
Or the movie?
refused.
Okay.
Yeah, there were 2 movies. I refused. It was yeah,
Hold on, Tom. Now, Tom, I know you watch this, and this came up in
yeah.
another episode. I love you, and I want you to produce a couple of the things and star in a few of my things. Charles doesn't. That's fine. He doesn't need it. Call me. Call me,
I
Tom.
do have
We'll make it
I
happen.
do have a bad guy in one of my books that is kind of based on Tom Cruise. So, I don't know. It was I've got this. I love the guy. He's a great actor. He's fun, but he is no Jack Reacher. That was heresy at the highest level.
I know that's and I actually did enjoy. I think the Cruise movies. Tom, don't watch this part. Until then, Amazon came out with the series,
Uh-huh.
and knowing by that point, I also knew the books better because I didn't know them years ago, or I hadn't really paid attention to them years ago. He just wasn't on my list of people to read. And as soon as that series came out, I'm like, that is Reacher. That is
Yeah.
totally Reacher. And I will tell you, second
They
season is even better than the first season, I think.
Okay.
And I
Okay.
did enjoy the
Yeah.
first season a lot. So, and I believe they're already greenlit. The third season is being worked on,
Yeah.
or will be produced and worked on as well. So,
Okay.
but Alan is like the perfect I you, the bad thing about that is almost typecasting because I don't think I could ever see him do another role now without me saying, "Hey,
Yeah.
look, Reacher's there. Who is he going to punch in the face or hit with
Yeah.
something or whatever?" So,
Yeah, really. I mean, I was always so my dad and I, we would read the
mhm,
Reacher books and the Clive Cusslers, and he was into the same kind of books, and we would talk about who we would cast for the movies
right,
way before Tom Cruise ever did a movie. And we were struggling to find actors back then. And
yeah,
then guys like Chris Hemsworth came around, and it was like, ooh, Chris Hemsworth would be one heck of a Jack Reacher.
right.
But this actor, Alan, what is it?
I think it's
Richard?
Richardson,
Yeah,
Richardson. Yeah.
yeah. I think that's
Sorry,
got a
Alan,
T
we're
in
getting
it.
your name wrong. We like you too, but
Alan's gonna unsubscribe now. But man, the
buy a
guy,
few
the
books
guy does
first,
such a
Alan, before you unsubscribe. Buy some books first.
yeah. We've got some here. We've got some here. Pick these. Um, so he's great. I mean, he is visually Reacher, and when you see some of those
Mhm.
scenes and they got the vibe, they followed the book so closely in the
Right.
first movie or the first season
Mhm.
from The Killing Floor. I went back afterwards and listened to the audiobook, and was really impressed at how well they stated the story and
Yeah.
pulled it out through the episodes. So super impressed. I mean, in my view, I would say that those Jack Reacher Amazon, or at least the first season, was the best book adaptation
Adaptions.
to any film I've ever seen. I mean,
Yeah.
it is so close and so accurate. Um, I would say one of my favorites
Mhm.
is the Bosch uh, um, on
Yes.
so
Yep.
Bosch is one that's a huge deal for me.
Yep.
Michael Conley, major influence, and what they did, the actor a little different than the Harry Bosch character in the book. There's just some
Yeah,
slight difference in appearance or whatever. But man, he nails the vibe. They
yeah.
nail the whole LA homicide vibe.
Mhm.
Um, they're getting it. Some of these guys are really starting to do it and
Yeah,
hit on all the
yeah.
things we're looking for readers.
Right. Well, Titus Welliver is the actor, and yeah, he is Bosch. I've seen, yeah, I've seen every season, and I've even seen the newer ones that are like not really a spin-off, but they're the additional seasons they put out. There's a name for it. Bosch Legacy, maybe, might be called Legacy. I can't remember what it's called now.
Legacy or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, and I think too,
they
what
put it on.
really, what's that?
Oh, they moved it to another channel, so it was like a little bit of a
Yeah, Freevee or Feevee or some. I still get on Prime, Amazon Prime, but I think, and now that you bring that point up and say that, I think part of what really helps that is that Michael Conley is involved heavily in the production, and that's rare. The only other person I know of personally that's been involved in the production is Jack Carr, involved with when they did the Terminal List. He was actually
yep.
involved in the script writing. He was on set. There was one time I texted him actually, and he was on set, and so that was the coolest thing. He's on set, so I was like, so we kind of went back and forth that night a few times. It's kind of spread out time wise. I don't know if I had my kids that night or not. So then I had this dumb idea of saying, "Hey, tell Chris Pratt, blah 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 blah,"
Yeah.
and then I checked my phone after, and he's like, "Oh, he's back filming already." I was like, I missed my chance to send a message to Chris Pratt. So,
Um,
you know,
yeah. Was it a hey, you need to star in the Body Man message?
it should have been, but I have a feeling that message wouldn't have got forward. Jack might like me, but he probably doesn't like me that much. So I don't think I'm getting any.
I don't know.
I don't I think he's focused
Like
on
I don't know.
his
He
stuff.
never.
But
Yeah, exactly.
again, another person that Chris, you might not be a good body man, but I bet you might know a few people that could. So,
Yeah,
um,
yeah, absolutely.
I, yeah, I don't know. There's a few. I've definitely gone down that path. To me, a good one, and not necessarily who I envision for the body man, but someone that actually adapts stuff and does a fantastic job is probably like a George Clooney. The stuff he puts
Oh,
together and he's heavily involved in like the producing side. He directs stuff. I think he's one of those actors that if you could ever get into their universe and get projects in front of him, I think would probably be a pretty fascinating one. So George, if Tom passes, call me. I've been near your house in Italy. I didn't get an invite, but I was close by there. I was at Lake Garda. I was, not too far from Lake Como, but no. It's fun to play that game. I don't let's circle back to
yeah.
writing. When you're writing, do you um are you are you thinking of ever the characters in a thematic way of like who would play or who you would or does that come after or does that come at all for you?
No, I actually have been really into casting my characters from the beginning,
Okay.
and then I use that program Scrivener for
Yeah.
novel writing. And
Mhm.
one of the most amazing things about Scrivener is you have those sidebar click. You can just one click and you can go to your character
Right.
sheets, and that you could put photos and descriptions and names
Mm,
and age and all the details. And so what I do is I typically will cast the like 10 main characters.
mm,
And
okay.
sometimes it'll be two actors that it's like it's somewhere in between here. But what
Right.
it does is it helps me when I'm writing, I visualize um it like a movie in a lot of ways.
Mhm.
So as I'm typing, I'm thinking in terms of like that guy, then some of the mannerisms, and it doesn't always transfer. I mean,
Mhm.
with Space Warfare Group, very much so.
Okay.
There's a couple of actors who absolutely, if somebody just said, "Hey, we're going to make a movie of Into the Darkness, Space Warfare Group, book number one," who would you cast for these five people? And I would say, I don't even have to think. I've got them all casted. If you can get them, this will be
I've got their
amazing.
file right here.
Yeah, just don't even like give me a half a second. And
Mm,
but with the new mystery novel, it was much harder
Yeah.
for some reason. It might be because it wasn't action, it was more like real. The characters are much more real,
Mhm.
and that that caused it to be less dynamic in casting kind of stuff. But
Yeah.
I use sort of different guys. Uh, but you know, the character ends up kind of developing, and then you, as you're thinking, because the way I think is constantly toward casting movie style things. So I'll be visualizing a character and then thinking about, like, you know, who would play that in a movie, and
Yeah.
it kind of blends a little bit. It's never just like, oh man, I want Tom Cruise in my book.
Mhm.
It's a little more character first, but I will do that real early uh, in the writing process.
Mhm. Well, I think that's great from a creative standpoint. To people that aren't that familiar with writing or are interested in writing, I would throw the caveat out there that all of us, okay, all is always a bad word to use. The vast
Yeah.
majority of us would be super excited if Hollywood comes knocking and wants to produce one of our books. The likelihood of that happening is actually fairly rare. B, the likelihood of getting what like Carr or Conley or whatever has, that they want you as the writer to actually be in any way involved after they give you probably much less money than you think you're going to get. Um, that's also not very likely. Normally they're like, "Hey, you." Tom Cruise will call me and be like, "Eric, I want the body man." I'm like, "Tom, I mean, it's about time, brother. I've been pushing for this for years." And he'll be like, "Here
Yeah.
is your 4 cans of Alpo and, your Kraft macaroni and cheese month supply, and, get out of here. Get
Yeah.
lost."
Yeah, right.
We don't want you on set. We don't want you writing scripts. We don't wanna see you again. And if you keep your mouth quiet, I might be able to get you the creamy macaroni and cheese
Right.
on top of it. It's like, "Thanks, Tom, I'm taking it." So, I
Yeah.
actually know, a very well-known New York Times bestseller author who will not sell, at least last I had talked to him about it, which has been a few years, would not sell the rights, only because the danger in that is of course, it depends on the deal you make, but if you're a no-name person, you don't get some spectacular deal, you get a pretty rudimentary deal. Once they own the right to that book, they can do whatever they want. They can
Yeah.
change the character's name, sex, religion, good guy, bad guy, whatever. They can a story that you've spent years putting together, Hollywood can be like, "Nah, that doesn't work for us. We're gonna do
Yeah.
this." And you as the author, you can keep writing your books, but that visual translation is taken out of your hands. So that's why this one particular author I talked to, where it's like, they're not offering me enough money to make me jump for that. It's, small potatoes. So
Yeah, no doubt. You probably are familiar with the story from Mark Graney when
mhm.
his Rayman stuff was optioned early on, and the talk from the production companies was they were going to turn Court Gentry into a female character,
Yep.
and I remember him just being. I don't remember how he responded. Mark seems to be so laid back about everything, but I'm
Nice
sure
guy.
that was hard. I mean, in a lot of ways, like, hey, I sold them the rights, and they're gonna do
Right.
that. But as it is, his adaptation was interesting, but probably still not really his, fully his vision. But it was much
Mhm.
closer, which is great. But could you
Yeah.
imagine, like, taking something like the Body Man and take those characters and twist them around? And in some regard, like, it could make a really interesting story,
Mhm.
but then it's no longer your story. And my question always is,
Right.
why did you buy that and then
Yeah.
change it? What's the point
100%.
of Yeah, because
100%.
you bought it because it was awesome for some reason. It's worthy of Hollywood taking
Something
interest.
stood out. Yes, correct.
Leave it alone.
Leave it alone. Yeah. Well, and I know obviously they're kind of like our babies. Those stories are close to us. We've spent sometimes years developing them. So we have a connection to those stories. So, and I think universally a writer sees their story absolutely as theirs. It's their vision. So to have someone come in and, say they want it and then change it, again, that's why some authors probably don't sell. But then the reality is too, if you want to try to make a living doing this, um, Powerball's right down the road at your local gas station. That might be a better option for you, first of all, author disclosure. But, B, you might be willing to take some money because, hey, that could be enough money for me to maybe you might get a decent offer and maybe you can not work full time. You can work part time for a year and write another story or, I've heard so many different stories. Like in the last 2 years, I know not personal friends, but people I've interacted with, other authors that have gotten 7-figure deals. One of them
Oh,
got a
wow.
7-figure deal for a book, first book, and a 7-figure movie deal. So, you know,
Wow.
A, that should be an encouragement to any writer that those are out there.
Yep.
However, B is that is the 1% of the 1% deals. You don't hear of those very often. So you can't bank on those
Yeah.
as being your reality. So the reality that I always tell people is, look, if you're getting into this, love writing stories, and great
Yeah.
things might happen, and maybe great things is not what you're looking for. Maybe you're not looking for Tom Cruise to buy your rights and all the stuff that comes with that. Maybe you just want to tell stories, and man, if a few people get to read them and you get to sell some copies, then mission accomplished. And it is mission accomplished. I mean, if you put your words
It is.
down and someone gets something out of that story, or someone enjoys that story, then, for almost every writer, you've accomplished a big goal right there. The question is, can you make a living off doing this? And
Yeah.
that's where you do have to look at it from the business perspective. And we've obviously talked a lot about that offline, talked about advertising and what we're trying to do with our stuff. And um, those days, and I've mentioned this on some other podcasts, and other people have heard it on lots of podcasts, is those days of sitting there and just writing a story and sending it to someone and going back to your cabin and working on your next story, those are gone. There
Yeah.
might be an exception here and there that happens to, but as a general rule, no. If you're going to write a story, you're going to have to be able to market that story. You're going to have to be able to come out and do a podcast. You have to articulate what it's about. Because and also no one's going to do a better job than you at that, unless you hire a professional actor or whatever that can act out and really, convey your story. As the storyteller, you're going to be the best person to convey to someone what that story's about.
Yeah, absolutely. It is different than it used to be. And
Yep.
it's better in the sense, like, I always love what Mark Dawson and James Blatch, they're the self-publishing formula.
Hmm.
Um, British guys, and what they always say is, it's an amazing time to be an author.
Hmm.
Was one of their catchphrases, and like, absolutely, the
Yeah.
type of independence we have, the ability to tell stories in the way that we want to tell stories, and writer or readers to be able to find stories that they want to
Right.
read, is really an exciting time.
Hmm.
But you can write all the books you want, and they can be really well done, and they can be precise and grammatically correct and no typos and stuff. But if you don't know how to market and sell the book,
Hmm.
then pretty much your mom reads it, and maybe a friend, a spouse, maybe, like,
Maybe,
and
maybe they might be interested. They're probably
maybe.
not,
I mean,
but maybe.
yeah, I mean, I won't. It's hilarious, and I probably shouldn't say any of this because I'm sure, my dear friends and people will watch. But I mean, there's a lot of family members who really have no interest in reading the book, don't have time to read the book and
Right.
stuff. And so it's like you can't depend on
Yeah.
your friends and family. And if your
No.
friends and family, your market, you certainly aren't going to sell a lot of books. So it has to be
100%.
a business. Write a book. I used to always say, now being in this a couple of years, is, you have to finish that book before you can do anything.
Yep.
And now I'm starting, as time has gone on, it's like finishing a book was monumentally difficult. However, almost anybody can finish a book of some sort
Hmm.
if they put the hard work in. Then the next question is, can you sell it? Uh, and that really is a whole nother level that is
Yeah.
just amazing. And me and guys like yourself and some of these guys and talking to them, it's such a cool network, and the
Hmm.
everybody that we encounter is just amazing, and sharing stories and talking and what works, what doesn't work,
Right.
encouraging each other, but also, you know, recommending and sharing and doing stuff is so much fun.
Hmm.
But man, if we're not doing that, then we just all have a bunch of books on our shelf that nobody
Yeah.
buys, nobody reads.
Well, and we're going the route of not going traditional publishing, and going that route, which I've tried before, and I probably will again with a couple of the projects that I'll jump back into in the next year or so. Going that route, like you said, and just to add on that, you can have a book that is phenomenal. But guess what? If you don't write a cover letter that catches that agent, and most of the time it's not the agent's attention you're catching, it's probably an intern that's been told, this is what I'm
Oh,
looking for. Here's my list of things I want. If something stands out on that list, then send it over to me. So if you don't write a cover letter that in some instances catches an intern from college or high school, who knows what level they're at,
yeah.
doesn't catch their attention, that agent's never even going to see it. And then, the agent is going to look at that. If an agent does see what you write, agent's not reading your book. Agent might read your first paragraph, maybe the first page, maybe the first chapter,
Yeah.
but it's possible they read that first paragraph. So if that first line doesn't even grab an agent, that could have been your chance, well, at least with that particular
Right.
agent.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's the brutal part of this business, brutal part.
Oh, it's so brutal. Yeah, even you just saying that makes me it, like makes me anxious even thinking about it because you've got to get past the intern, you got to get then past the agent and actually get the agent to support you. And then maybe a long shot. I mean, how many authors have agents and can't get a publishing deal? And so there's a ton of books out there. And in having studied those things from the beginning, when I
Mhm.
decided I wanted to actually, try to build a business with
Right.
writing. Um, Studying those options and seeing what some guys, I'll throw some names out there, guys like Chris Fox, who is a sci-fi writer, and he was writing a lot of books and he was doing a lot of stuff on YouTube. Amazing. I couldn't believe what he was doing. Joanna Penn, who has the
Mhm.
podcast, another one, woman writing adventure novels. She was having great success. Mark Dawson blew my mind when he started
Mhm.
sharing what he was selling on Amazon. I still use them as an example, virtually everything.
Yeah.
When people say things like, well, how do you even sell a book on Amazon? I'm like, listen, I know guys that
Mhm.
sell like over $100,000 a month
Yeah.
in books just on Amazon.
Just on Amazon,
So
exactly.
just on Amazon. And 90% of that's probably ebooks,
Yeah.
digital file transfer. And so it's legit.
Mhm.
But also, I think even in this realm, it's the 1% still to have that kind of success.
Right.
And so then it's something different, so there's a bunch of other levels that we're all trying to find our way through, but it
Yeah.
still comes down to writing story, telling stories. Like
Right.
if we, I think you said at the beginning, if you don't want to, if you don't love telling a story in written form, then you'll probably never even work on a book.
Correct. You'll definitely more than likely, you'll not finish it. You might start something, and you mentioned it as well earlier, and yeah, a lot of people say they're gonna write a book, and even though there's millions of self-published books out there, there's, what, 8 billion people on the planet. So the amount of people that have actually taken the time, not published a book, let's just say wrote a book, the amount of people that have actually wrote an entire novel or a book more than a couple pages, that's still a small percentage, you know.
Right? People who read a single book in a year is a small percentage, right? I mean, I have to look back, at the new year, there was somebody had posted something about the percentage of books people read a year, and it was something like the top 5, 5th percentile was, like, reading more than 1 book a year or something like that.
Yeah.
And it was shocking, and get people that read a book a month was, like, top single percentile kinda
Single
stuff.
percentile,
And
yeah.
so they make that so that's just reading a book. Turn that into writing a book. Now, as we've joked around before, like, I'm
Mhm.
not reading a lot of books right now because I'm writing, but I'm still reading, quite a few books on top of writing. And,
Right.
but the people who finish a book, it's a very tiny percentage. Um, and then to get that to market in some way that's presentable is probably a fraction of that as well.
Correct, yeah.
Right. Yeah.
I just got my third book that someone wants me to, and I'm in a position where people are wanting me to read their books. That's an honor and a blessing. But I just got my third one in a week. Um, I told the person, I've got two other ahead of you, and I'm a little behind. I hope they understand that's my code word for like, oh darn, I don't know when I can get to this. And I will, and I'll make an effort. And this person's been super kind to me. I mean, shoot. Oh, did yours didn't turn off yet? Okay, I got my digital version back here. Deceitful above all things. I I don't want to just
Yeah.
buy a copy for a friend and stare at it every now and then. I want to read this, but I still haven't read it. I think I've
Yeah.
had it in my Kindle for 3 weeks now. But it's
I read
crazy.
I I read these books.
Well, yeah, you're a better friend. See, you actually read his
Look at
books.
this guy. Look at that guy. I
Ooh,
don't I
the,
that's
the first. So when the
yeah.
publisher
Well,
created that, the first iteration, which was not what was final, but the first iteration was, I'll just say, heavily airbrushed, and I thought I looked like a Kardashian Jenner slash some kind of mixture of human
oh,
person. It looked
that's
I
hilarious.
said, "That cannot be the photo that you used, because I will burn the books, and anyone I know will make fun of me, and, 'Oh, no, that wasn't the final version.'" I'm like, "Thank goodness, because I couldn't let that
Yeah,
go out." It was so
that's
that one was
uh,
workable, but
oh, so I read
my
book.
son's doing my next picture for me. I haven't we haven't got it, but
Okay, good. Yeah,
he'll be doing breach of trust photo for me with his nice camera.
okay, that's awesome. I read Body Man. I don't remember. It was a few months after it came out. I can't
Uh,
remember, but I read this one recently, and I was so thankful that it was a novella because I was like, hey,
Short.
I can read 140 pages. Yeah, that was great. But yeah, just giving you a hard time. You'll get there someday. Yeah.
I I will. I will. And honestly, one way I have been getting through them more recently is I broke down last fall, summer. I can't remember now. I've got Audible account,
Oh yeah.
so that's how I'm starting to get through more books. Mine aren't even available yet for Audible. I just haven't. I've looked into it. I was almost pulled the trigger once, and I just, from a business standpoint, I need to make sure it's viable to spend that kind of money, or to, if you hire someone and give away the most of the profits, that might still be an option. But then I don't know. The voices that I'd like for it are where I'm having like, well, I'm gonna have to pay for that voice, and it's like, okay, I need to, because you
Yeah.
can't, like, going through Audible. ACX is the one you go
Yeah.
think you go through Audible. You don't name your price. So if I can name my price, I can figure out how many copies do I need to sell to break even or whatever. Well, when you can't name your price, it's kind of a mystery of, man, am I going to have to sell 50, 100 of these, or am I have to sell 1,000 of these to break even? That's where it gets scary. And but I know people that a third of their income comes from audiobooks. So
Yeah.
they're
We've
getting
got to
more and
get
more.
there. Yeah, I mean, especially my sci-fi books, they're absolutely uh prime for audio book country. I mean, all the men especially who I wrote the
Mhm.
book for, um, that don't have time to read the
Yep.
pages, want to listen. I get requests all the time, and I keep telling people like when I can afford it, we will have audiobooks. And I have a dream. I don't know, we'll see this year, but I have a desire to finish the third book in the series this year, get
Mhm.
that published, and then begin the process of a package deal on some audio for the three
Okay.
books together, and try to do. And I have the novella, so that would be four books.
Hmm.
I would love to do a four-book deal with a narrator, have them produce it all,
Yeah.
pay for it front, like own the product fully, and then figure out where I'm going to sell it,
Right.
because there are some, just like independent, selling of your ebooks and paperbacks, it is a dangerous market with the rights and the whole thing. So,
100%.
hard,
Absolutely. Yeah.
but um, that's something I really desire to do as well.
Yeah. Well, and it's cool that we've got the ability to dream, ability to come up with different stories, and then we have we're fortunate to be able to market them and find an audience and try a different way of, looking, like we've been talking offline about ads and stuff, of how do you get your product? Because again, like I was saying before, it used to be, Theodore Kaczynski just sat in his cabin and wrote his manifesto. He could do that, and heck, the media might pick up on that if you write a really good manifesto. You can't do that now. Even Theodore would have to go out and actually promote his manifesto probably now in this
Yeah.
market. Like, e
Which actually eats into your writing time as well. Like this morning, I usually write in the mornings and before I
Mhm.
go into the office for my day job. And today I decided, you know what, I need to work on these ads and do some new
Yep.
graphics and mess around with some stuff. And it took up an hour and a half doing that, and it was necessary.
Yeah.
But that's an hour and a half of writing that I couldn't do. So
Right.
uh, that's part of the juggling battle. And I know the full-time guys, they have this great plan, schedule of write in the morning, take your lunch break, exercise, then do your ads in the afternoon.
Mhm.
Like, yeah, sounds lovely.
Sounds great. Yeah, just, do some profit sharing with me, and I'll be glad to do that from my own stuff, but yeah, no, I we'll get there. We'll get there. But the only
Yep.
way we do get there is by doing what we're currently doing and giving it what we have, giving it our all, and in a balance too. That's the one thing that I've always said from the get go is, the writing's great, and it's more than just a passion or a hobby. It's something I'm supposed to do, but it has to fit into the place of life too. It can't be an obsession that that's all I work on. My kids are here for 5 days straight, and I'll be like, "Hey, good to see you guys. Make your meals. Dad's gonna be in the back writing." No, that doesn't happen. For me, it flips the opposite. When the
Yeah.
kids aren't here, then I've got that motivation of saying, "Okay, I don't have dad responsibilities at the moment, so this is my time to actually say, okay, what am I going to do with my free time?" And this weekend, I had some lofty writing goals, and I didn't meet most of them because I just felt like, man, I got to get out there, and I have to physically be out in nature. It was a beautiful weekend here in the South, and I did 10 and a half miles yesterday on the trail, which I was not expecting when I got up and was meeting a friend at noon yesterday. But we did 10 and a half miles. But I needed that. And the creativity that came from that was better than me just sitting on my couch saying, okay, time to do your thing, turn it on. No, I needed that creativity to kind of push me forward.
Yeah, I love that. We did not have a nice weekend. We got 20 plus inches of snow on my property this weekend.
Nice.
It
Nice.
was brutal. Yeah, we got hammered. Yeah,
'Cause you're,
it it
oh,
was
that's
really.
right. Because further south, they were having a lot of winds and other issues, right? I think
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
yeah,
So I'm about an hour south of Lake Tahoe. So
hours south of
we're
Tahoe. Okay, gotcha.
yeah, so where we're at, we're still in the high desert, and we get that storm coming over the Sierra Nevada
Yeah.
mountains from like somewhere out on the ocean, and man, where we're located, it just dumped like crazy. It was pretty
But
impressive.
and I did hear that Yosemite was, I think, closed this weekend, and that was
Yeah,
probably they were probably getting hit in some of that storm too, because they actually had told people, "Don't come because 'cause we're closing the gates for 2, 3 days," or whatever.
yeah,
So wow.
yeah. It's not beautiful, but
So
anyway.
let's dive into so you have two different we want to make sure we talk about this. So you have two different series currently going. I know your Hanklin mystery just launched last month in February.
Yep,
There we go.
mystery.
See, yeah, my digital version has a little bit of a glare on it. Has the tablet hasn't gone to sleep yet. Oh, it's still not good. My goodness. Okay, well,
Yeah, it doesn't look too bad
nope,
though.
doesn't look too bad. Okay, for me it look. Does that look okay?
That looks okay.
Getting a
Yeah.
little too much background light. So, um, but so Hank's series obviously is a pretty vast departure from your space warfare group. So, tell the audience about what you have. There's Into the Darkness, book number one,
Yeah.
and we have Bring Up Shrouded in Darkness. Come on,
Oh,
Is-
oh, yes,
oh, you got to have Shrouded in Darkness. Okay, and then of course we also have a novella in here. We have Night Terror.
we do.
Back
Which
there. He wasn't prepared, folks. My goodness, he has to
Yeah,
reach.
how
So,
did
there we
I have
go.
my Night Terror? Yeah, so Night Terror is my novella, which is very similar size to yours, very much just like a movie kind of thing. But yeah, so Into the Darkness was number one. That was the first one published,
Mhm.
and it actually took 4 years to write that book.
Wow,
Um,
okay.
yeah, 4 years to write that book. This one took me 9 months to write and publish, which is, you learn how to do it. But yeah, so I
Yeah.
started in sci-fi, but I didn't sci-fi wasn't where I was wanting to be necessarily. There
Okay.
was reasons why I ended up, but so I am writing sci-fi, but um, it's hard to call it sci-fi. I mean, it is in space and it is space military, so it's far future space stuff, but it's really a political thriller
Mm,
in the sort of Vince Flynn, Tom Clancy kind of genre with politics and conspiracies and
mhm.
special forces military and that sort of thing. And that just happens to be in space in the far future.
Okay.
So in a lot of ways, I consider them political thrillers in
Mhm.
space. And and then the new one is a straight ahead murder mystery series, like something like a CJ Box, small town sheriff kind of thing, like the Joe Pickett style. So these two different things. I published two sci-fi books and the novella, and then the mystery came out this year. So that was the fourth. The mystery was the fourth book I published.
For you, how was it creatively to go from like you said, it was definitely in the world or the thought process of the political thriller like Clancy or Flynn, um, but set, with more of a space setting. Was it difficult to go from that world and how did you get your head around doing what you did for for those or the first two novels anyways, or the start with the first one? And then kind of switch gears though and take it more of like, you're out around Lake Tahoe and you have this, Bosch, or you have this, this crime series basically that you're starting.
Yeah, heavily influenced by Michael Conley. Big time. Michael Conley was a huge influence on me. So the sci-fi books have been really difficult to write because I'm not a huge sci-fi reader. I
Mhm.
love Star Wars. I love Star Trek. I love we just went and saw the Dune movies. I love all things sci-fi in movies and TV. As far as books go, I don't read much sci-fi. So the writing of building a world that is somewhat original and somewhat
Mhm.
believable, and not irritating the people who want hard sci-fi because they want, like, astrophysics and
Mhm.
all this kind of stuff that I'm not going to do in the books. That's been really challenging. So writing the Space Warfare Group books are I won't say it's a grind, like it's hard, like it's a chore, but it's a grind, like, okay, what is this weapon going to be, so
Right.
that it's interesting and it feels familiar, because
Right.
I want everything to feel familiar, but it
Mhm.
is something unique and different. So it might just be naming, or thinking. I remember while writing um, Into the Darkness, in the end, there's this scene where they've got these, like, energy weapons, and the main character Mac, he's shooting and something's wrong. He turns the gun and pushes the button at the back, and it gives a charge, lights that show how much charge, and he's got to dump the essentially energy magazine and put a new one in. Well, that whole idea of, like, touching the back button and the lights showing up. I mean, that's what my drill does in my garage, when I'm, like, building the deck, and I'm like, why is this weak? And I hit this button and it's got lights on it. And so it's like that kind of stuff has to be like, you're trying to incorporate familiar things, like I said, but in
Right.
a way that feels far future or is believable. And it is challenging. And
Mhm.
but at the same time, you can pretty much make up anything you want,
Right.
because it's sci-fi. And I've argued that my sci-fi fits more in line with, like, a Star Wars sci-fi, where it's as much fantasy as it is science. In fact, there's no science. Mine is more, it's out there. So
Mhm.
that's been really challenging, but I love the characters. The story is complex. It's a very big story that it's intimidating as a writer to try to
Mhm.
keep up with the world and keep up with the plot. Going into the mystery series, it's small, the setting's small, the characters are fewer, they're
Mhm.
more real. The things are real.
They're not
It
charging
just
their phasers before they, shoot the guy
Yeah.
into the lake, and he
Oh
he
man,
just
you don't have to.
disintegrates and obliterates.
Yeah. Yeah. I didn't have to create an alien species just to have a conversation and like, do all this background work. I didn't have to describe a spaceship. I didn't have to create a planet and a whole culture. It's just sometimes I think, writing sci-fi and fantasy is so complex
Right.
that once you get a bit of a, like, I believe now I have like this machine where I have ways of creating names and cultural things to
Hmm.
be consistent within one group. And, so I've kind of learned how to do that,
Sure.
but it's fantastic to just be able to say like, Hank carries a Glock 43 in 9 millimeter.
Hmm.
That's what he carries. He's got an inner waistband Kydex holster.
Right.
And he puts his his untucked polo shirt over the top of it. And I'm like, wow, that was easy to write.
Yeah. You don't have to create a new clothing line or futuristic. There's no
Oh,
zippers or
yeah. What is that?
Velcro in your future, so it's
Well, I mean, I literally like I've got this character in the sci-fi books that it's he's like he's called the Prime Ambassador. He's basically
okay.
the uh what's our the president's number one diplomat. Now I'm losing my mind. Secretary of State.
Okay.
So he's basically, yeah, like he's basically like Secretary of State for a huge multi-planet UN style government, and he's the prime ambassador to all other alien nations, right?
So he's the
Or
bad guy,
alien
right?
world. He, I mean, he sounds pretty bad. Yeah.
Sounds like this could be the bad guy.
Like I said, I want things to be familiar. Uh, it feels familiar. And just his name's Kissinger. No, his name's not Kissinger. Um, but
Does he have an
for
ear,
example,
something in his ear that tells him what to say? Is it telling him exactly what, and he just mouths it, correctly?
yes, yes, he does. He
Yes.
does, however, he does, however, have a a company that builds military equipment that he does secretly. He's a secret partner in a military a manufacturer of military
No,
weapons
no
and
conflict of interest here. This sounds like reality.
yeah, sounds like fantasy, right? But anyway, so this guy, like he has to be so opulent.
Hmm.
Everything has to be so over the top because he's so rich and he's so powerful
Yeah.
that you start thinking like, okay, well, what was this like uber powerful, super rich guy in the far future? What does he eat? In a meal, like
Yeah.
how does he have a meal? And so I'm like describing like this steak that he's eating, which is from some buffalo off some wild, made up planet, roaming the fields and trying to again like something that would make sense, but then you have to
Right.
make up all this lore
Oh, yeah.
behind him eating a steak. Now, I guess you could say that he was eating a steak, right? But it's so much more interesting and colorful that
Yeah.
he's eating a steak that is this special type of buffalo from this luxury planet that everybody knows is like the Rolls Royce
Hmm.
of the
Right.
galaxy. And so and he's a grass-fed deal and
Of
everything, the
course.
wine glasses, the suit he's wearing, the ship he's in, everything is um set up that way. And then you have the other type of guys that are the opposite. They're more, blue collar,
Hmm.
dystopian, coming out of war and so it's complex to
Right.
say the least, but it does make for some fun writing
Some fun.
when
Yeah.
you make some really crazy stuff.
I think probably when it comes to fantasy in a way, Tolkien probably ruined it for everybody because once you like create your own language and create a mythical background that, few authors have done anything to the detail he did or has in the future or will in the future probably.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's and the other thing too that I was going to ask you about that is, and because I'm the same way with you. I don't dive into sci-fi very much. I'm currently writing something that is completely outside my genre, and it will have not a mythical component to it, but it has an otherworld
Absolutely.
component basically that's not reality. And I'm having trouble describing it because that's not what I write, that's not my interest or any of that. Um do you find with the sci-fi, A, do you look at your reviews, and B, if you do you find people are critical? And the side note on that is, how can you be critical of something that's it's all made up anyways. They're really author's note here. Star Trek does not exist. Star Wars even does not exist.
I
Th-
I do not think I
Sorry.
believe you at
Yeah,
this
I know.
point.
Well,
Well,
this is
yeah, so I do read my reviews, but
okay. You do.
primarily yeah, I do, and I at times shouldn't, of course, because I've got enough now that and because I run ads, and I've already burned through, like, my mom and my brother and my good friends have read the books, and they gave me 5 stars, and now it's the unknown person who are reading books that bought it in, like, they bought it in Pennsylvania, and they read it, and they are, sometimes ruthless, and I've got
Yeah.
some, like, one-star reviews. One guy said that he quit reading the book because in one of my opening sequences of Into the Darkness, I love this idea. I've got these space pirates that are kind of these like Yeti, like Bigfoot, Chewbacca kind of guys, and
Mhm.
they have this machine, this spaceship that crashes into other spaceships, and it grinds a hole like a drill, and it
Okay.
augers in, and then it opens a mouth, and then they pour in and take over the spaceship. I mean, it
Mhm.
is so much fun. It's kind of like, this Mad Max and space kind of thing. Well,
Right.
I had a reader say, well, this is idiotic because you can't do that kind of um, force contact between elements in space because there's no gravity and it's just totally absurd.
Yeah.
And I quit after the second chapter or whatever. And I'm like, I don't even know what to do with that because I'm not writing about physics and
I
science.
know.
I'm
Charles, I bought this space military sci-fi book, and I'm very pissed off at you for not making it 100% realistic to how it would work in my
right,
mind.
right,
How
right.
dare
So
you?
then Yeah, so then I'd have to say like, okay, all these alien species, cross those off because to our knowledge, there are no aliens in the universe. And then beyond that, we can barely get outside of our own, orbit before things, I mean, it just, I, I, I appreciate what he's saying, but he gave me a 1 star for that. But okay, so that's really
Yeah.
frustrating. The people who like the book tend to like the characters and they like the plot, which is the
Mhm.
whole point. It's a story that should suck you in and like the characters. But one that was really hard to read the other day actually was somebody had posted or put a review up that said, obviously not written by a military veteran.
Hmm.
And I thought, I was like, that's totally fair.
Mhm.
But I'm not writing about the military
Yeah.
also, right? I'm writing about some characters who are in a far future made up
Right.
military.
Yeah.
And but his point was about like, missing some of the camaraderie and things. And I don't know. I wasn't in the military, so I
Mhm.
can't speak to that. But some of those things you just realize it's not for everybody. And
Yeah.
I don't get much negative in terms of the sort of world building. In fact,
Okay.
a lot of people have said
Hmm.
that they love world building and they find it to be a really exciting place to kind of escape to.
Well, you've done this enough that you're good at what you're doing, and yeah, you can't please everybody. And to me, and I've mentioned this before, and it can come across probably as selfish. I don't write a novel based on what I think someone is going to like. I write a novel that I'm going to like. And if I read
Yep.
that novel and I get done with it and I go and I finish writing it and I go and I do my first read through and I go, man, that's a good story. Mission accomplished. That's what I set out to do.
Yeah.
Now, do I want Charles Hack to write it to enjoy it? Yes, absolutely. I don't want people to be like, "Man, this is horrible." Of course not. But my first rule in doing that is, are you happy with what you put out? And if I'm happy with what I put out, then that's ultimately the first person that I want to impress is, can I be happy with, just like in life. If you look for happiness from another person, they're gonna let you down. They might not let you down every time, but they will let you down. So if you wanna find happiness,
Yeah, they will.
that's coming inside. Now, what's
Yep.
inside is gonna come out as well. So find joy, find happiness. Don't expect someone else to put that inside you because it's not gonna work. So same with stories,
Yeah.
write something you're proud of and hopefully it will connect with people and do a really darn good job writing something that you believe in and that hopefully other people will. But again, you're not going to please everybody.
There has to be a enough integrity and genuineness of the story and the characters that come
Mhm.
from within the author,
Yeah.
because we can write to market, write the tropes, do the things that the other guys are doing that sell books,
Hmm.
but it's not genuine, and it's
Right.
not, there's going to be some really interesting idiosyncrasies from an author
Hmm.
that sets them apart. Their
Yeah.
voice, the way that they approach a story or some character stuff. I had a friend of mine was just laughing about my books. He's been one of my beta readers and he's read them all. And he says, one thing that is an absolute guarantee in a Charles Hack book, and I was expecting him to say something about like characters or something. He says there's always going to be a government conspiracy, and the bad guys are going to be the government. And I was like, fair. That's fair because that's where I come from.
You know what
Maybe
country I
not.
live in? I mean,
Yeah. I read the
find that
news,
country for
man.
me that doesn't work that way. I'll sell, and I can then sell you that empty plot of land somewhere.
Exactly. But I do think that integrity is key to what we're producing as a story because
Hmm.
if I'm going to repeat it, write 5 books in that series or something, those characters, they need to not be like styrofoam. They
Yeah.
have to have some place in our like mind and hearts to flow out of us as an author.
Yeah.
And that
100%.
starts philosophical, but I think that's a real deal.
So where did Hank come from? How did you, since that seems like
Yeah,
that's probably more something that aligned to maybe what you wanted to write, maybe,
yeah.
so how did Hank transpire?
Yeah, absolutely. So I wanted to write more of like what you're writing, to tell you the truth, like your body man stuff. The reason I enjoyed that book when I read the first, I can't remember, I maybe the first third. I remember telling my wife, I'm like, this is the vibe. I mean, this like, Washington D.C., FBI, there's murder, there's like
Mhm.
it's the vibe, man. I loved it. And those are the kinds of things that I've wanted to do. But in addition, I've always wanted to write mysteries,
Yeah.
and I love mysteries. I love police procedurals. The very first novel I started writing ever, when my daughter was young, after I did the short story thing, the very first one was a murder mystery novel, and that story I never finished because I
Okay.
ran into some plot problems.
Mhm.
But uh, it would kind of fit within this Hank world, and someday I might dust that off and revise it to fit into kind of a Hank story. But
Mhm.
so Hank, I don't even know that I can tell you where the character came from, but the whole concept came from the idea of like, I want to write murder mysteries, small town,
Mhm.
focus a lot on setting. Setting's got to be a key element. It's a character. Um, and I want some good character interaction, maybe a tiny bit of romance,
Mhm.
to add the development of characters and things. And I want to write a long series of these
Okay.
fun sort of mysteries, but I didn't want to go police procedural like a Michael Conley Bosch because I'm not a police officer
Yeah.
either. So I wanted to do amateur detective,
Mhm.
but I wanted him to be a guy who had some so a good resume. So he's a former military
Mhm.
army investigator, so army criminal investigator. And his story, he was basically blown up in a ambush um, in I'm trying to remember where we put it. I think it was in Afghanistan,
Mhm.
and he basically is out on medical leave and
Okay.
has come home to Tahoe, where his dad
Mhm.
was wealthy and had this big business. His dad has just passed away. These are all in the first chapter.
Mhm.
And he's home dealing with his dad's death and the injuries that he has, and he's got some post-traumatic stress. Some of his best friends were blown up in the attack. So he's just a mess when he gets there.
Yeah.
And so then to have this like rich dad in Tahoe thing, I developed the idea that the dad was a Silicon Valley computer guy, which then made turned into his dad was Chinese
Hmm.
because he was this. So then I'm like, wow, okay, so Hank's Chinese. That's interesting. I didn't know
Mm,
that. So he's actually half. Yeah, the way that it formed,
that's
I
interesting.
don't even know the thread of how it came about. I don't remember anymore, but I know my wife and I would have lots of conversations
Mhm.
about characters and whatever. And the name Hank was like that was always like there.
Yeah.
And then we had yeah, so what I did is his dad was Chinese, his mom was white, and so he's half. So he's kind of a different character because you don't
Yeah.
get a lot of protagonists in the
Yeah,
industry.
you don't.
And no, I can't think of any. And he's a very friendly, easygoing, charismatic guy, but he's military trained and he's kind of a hardcore
Mhm.
detective,
Hmm.
having dealt with, gun runners in Afghanistan and stuff, right? I mean, he was dealing with some terrible stuff. Now he's in Tahoe and he gets wrapped up in this. His old high school friends
Hmm.
happen to be the pastor of the local church, is his former best friend. Well, his childhood best friend is the pastor of the church in town
Okay.
now, which is a bit shocking to him. He's like, okay. And then,
Not what he expected him to become.
yeah, yeah, totally like different paths, right?
Yeah.
And then this woman, Sierra McLean, who is um an old friend from high school as well.
Mhm.
And she is a sheriff's deputy and she's running for sheriff because her dad used to be sheriff and he died in
Okay.
office. And a lot of people died to get to where we're at. And yeah, but so she's the officer, she's a sheriff deputy. He's recovering, he reconnects with these old friends, and he can't help himself but to start like snooping around because
Mhm.
his old friend Sierra is like really distraught over this murder mystery and some
Yeah.
stuff that's going down. And he's just like, it like snaps him out of his depression, his
Yeah.
darkness to investigate. And so I wanted to deal with those elements: sadness,
Mhm.
loss, death,
Sure.
faith, um, the pressure of friends and family who
Mm.
are of faith, dealing with, um, but also to have a character who's one of the things I really like about what CJ Box does with Joe Pickett is Joe Pickett's an everyday guy. There's nothing fancy or exciting about him. He's
Right.
pretty much not great at anything. He kind of
Mhm.
stumbles on things. He's just such an average guy. And I love that aspect of the Joe Pickett character. And I wanted that same realism where
Mhm.
like you feel like Hank, like he's
Yeah.
literally that guy that works down the hall in the room, down
Right.
there. And he makes me laugh at lunch and that sort of thing. And he's pretty laid back. That's who I wanted the character to be. But then when
Mhm.
the things come down to it, he's very sharp and
Mhm.
he's also um, will do anything to not only protect his friends and his family, but
Mhm.
he'll take care of business because he's been trained to take care of business.
Right. Yeah, he's had that training,
Yeah,
which yeah, no, I like that a lot. Um,
yeah,
so speaking of which, so a couple of things that you mentioned, just in that and talking about Hank's world and his friends' background. So you actually, your day job is being a pastor.
that's right. Yeah,
So
yeah.
you also have, on top of writing these political conspiracy theory space warfare novels, you also have novels that involve murder around Lake Tahoe and some,
Yep,
some bad things. And then
yep.
you're writing sermons.
And I'm writing sermons. Yeah,
How does all that work together? And the follow-up to that, while you're answering that is, does that cause any issues knowing what your fiction is about? Do you feel any kinda,
mm,
not kickback, but, how is it received by parishioners or people at church?
yeah. Those are wonderful questions, and I love how you phrase all that. It's hilarious.
I have a
What
script right
my
here that I just read. I'm glad I read it correctly.
so great. The first thing that came to mind was, well, I read the Bible, so of course my story includes all those things, conspiracies and murder, and yeah.
Cain took
Um,
care of Abel pretty well. I mean,
yes. So that very first novel that I said I was writing that I never finished, that was the murder mystery,
Yeah.
started out as not an allegory, but like a version of Cain and Abel,
Mm,
where
fascinating.
the yeah, and that's why I still want to go back to that, because it does have this element of like a biblical story done differently. But
Sure.
um, yeah, so I've intentionally made sure that all the books are palatable for every reader.
Okay.
Um, so, and what that means is that, like, I'm not embarrassed if my mom reads it, because
Mhm.
it doesn't have any language, doesn't have any sex scenes, it doesn't have anything what I would
Understood.
call, yep, they're PG in the sense of language and all that stuff. They are violent.
Mhm.
That's the one thing, is they do have a lot of violence
Mhm.
because it's war and it's not gratuitous. It's not like like a James Reese Jack Carr book where he's, stacking bodies as he goes through town kind of
He's
thing.
cutting out entrails and wrapping them
Oh,
around, trees or whatever it
I
is to
yes, yes. I mean, I still have nightmares over some of those scenes. Um, love them, love them. But yeah, so intentionally writing in a way that my kids could read, my wife could read, my mom could
understood.
read, the older lady at church could read,
Mhm.
the other pastor that I know could read. But then somebody who doesn't know me, who just wants to read a book and enjoy sci-fi or enjoy a mystery or something, and have it be simply absent of language and sex scenes, and that's really
Mhm.
the what I've done, and I think that's been well received. There is a little bit of, I wouldn't call it pushback, but there is an awkwardness when you do serve as in ministry as a pastor, and you have these, very close, loving relationships with people, and then you're
Mhm.
like, hey, by the way, here's a whole nother side of me. Look, aliens, right? And
Right.
and yeah, and the aliens thing is hard too, because, as a Christian in the Bible, you start talking about aliens, you become a heretic very quickly. And you can't
I think
necessarily, you
they're in
can't,
Leviticus. They're somewhere in the Old there's a
yeah,
mention here or there. Come on.
there are some that argue that there are some all kinds of things in there. Yeah. A lot of,
Zechariah has a nuclear bomb in it. If you read Zechariah, actually, there is a reference that you could make it believe that it's a
that's
nuclear explosion.
podcast for us to go down. But
We'll do that one next
but
time.
yeah, that'd be so much fun. So having to the my biggest worry was writing about far future space and aliens from a Christian perspective, and
Yeah.
most of the time, mostly everybody has been fine with it. No pushback there. More of what I hear is like, I have no interest in that, and I'm like, I'm totally okay with that.
Right.
There have been others who have had a little less comfort with, I don't know who this person is with these books with a pen name, because Charles Hack is a pen name
Mhm.
to keep the two things separate.
Yeah.
Eh, um, but I will say this: I believe that writing and thinking about story has helped me in writing sermons. And what I do is,
Mm.
so we have three pastors at our church, and one preaches primarily every week. I'll preach like monthly, or every 6 weeks or something.
Okay.
And then I do what's called I do what's the theology, the Sunday school 9 a.m. Sunday school theology class, which is basically a sermon,
Mhm.
half sermon, half lecture. But it's still very sermonic. So I'm writing a 10-page sermon basically every week, and I'm doing my studies and my research.
Right.
But what I have found is, I think it's helping and it's improving my sermons
Sure.
by storytelling and
Mhm.
bringing the story of the scriptures out,
Yeah.
and then communicating that story to the congregation in a spoken form, right?
Mhm.
With understanding, interpretation, application, those things to help them understand those stories and how it applies. Like, how does the story of Cain and Abel apply to the
Right.
Christian in 21st century America, right? And understanding story, because God is a storyteller, and it's so amazing.
Mhm.
One of the um, I won't go too deep into this really quick, but um, one of the ways that humanity is made in the image of God is that we use words. We're the only other, we're the only creature on the planet that exists that uses words.
Mhm.
and we're made in the image of our creator who spoke and brought the world into existence. And
Mhm.
so we have a word using, speaking God who
Mhm.
created us with words and gave us the gift of language for relationships and glorifying him and stuff. So we can then use language to
Mhm.
his glory, whether that's a story or a sermon or simply encouraging somebody or whatever, right? So I find it actually to be a calling at such a high level
Mhm.
for a Christian, anybody who does believe in the biblical story, that we've been given this gift to tell story.
Mhm. No, that's awesome. Totally awesome. So you mentioned before, just circling back to Hank. So you see Hank as a series, right?
Yes,
Have you
yes.
have you started his next adventure yet?
So I have some outlines
Okay.
and some concepts for about 5 books
Okay.
that I yeah, yeah. There's a novella coming, which will be a Christmas novella, something involving a guy in a Santa suit being killed on the side of the road. It's going to be fantastic.
This should be a good Sunday
And
morning thing to bring up during, you know, I mean,
yes,
go
yes,
buy a copy of the
uh,
novella and we're gonna study it on Sunday morning. I think you're onto something
it's
here.
a Christmas
And it's a
story, kid.
just put a little, put a couple biblical references and you'll be fine. So no.
Well, of course, they're going to some like, Christmas Eve service at the church or something when he stops to help a guy on the side of the road and there's a
In
murder.
their
And
ugly
so
sweaters. Please tell me they're in their ugly sweaters too.
that's absolute has to. Yeah. So I've got a novella planned. I've got two stories for Hank that I want to write like today.
Today, if you yeah,
But
right.
yeah, that I'm like super excited about both of them.
Okay.
But they're on pause
Yeah.
while I work on. Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
then your
So
third Space Warfare would come out later this year, and then possibly the next thing to come out would be a Hank related story.
yes, absolutely. I would love to have Hank number 2 out by Christmas. That would just be a lot of work. I
Yeah.
that might be more than I can handle,
Well,
but
I
I'm gonna
think
try.
you have figured out what you're doing, so you'll pace yourself and you'll make it work in the right timing, I think. So, um,
Yeah, and I have to tell myself that 1 extra month or 2 extra months of finishing and getting it out and making it better is
yeah.
fine. Like I don't have to. I'm inspired by guys like yourself who set your pre-order like out in June or something, and I'm like, June, it's January, man. That pre-order should be like February 2nd. But the June date allows you to make a better book and
Yeah.
it's less stressful.
Well,
What I
and
tend
for me, it's because I'm lazy at heart and I'm a procrastinator by nature. I'm sure a couple people could attest to that. So if I give myself a deadline, then I
Okay.
have to stick with it because I put it on Amazon. And then a month or two before that deadline strikes is when I can really stop hiking and crunch down. And actually,
Yeah.
with Breach of Trust that had been worked on for so long, I could have Breach of Trust out probably in about a month and a half for right now, but I intentionally did that for multiple reasons. And then also I wanted to pace myself the right way and not because this venture started. So with doing a podcast, I've had several people say, "You got so much going on. Why do you have so much going on? Or how are you handling it all?" And the truth is it's not as much as it might look like, but I think I've figured out the structure of how I need to get this stuff done. And because I also want to go out and enjoy life, I want to go to concerts, I want to do some traveling, and scaled some of that back this year. But I also do view it as important as the stories are to come out. I also don't want to miss out on other opportunities in life. That's kind of like why I went hiking yesterday with a friend because a couple of us ended up going, man. Yeah, I could have worked on stories, but I have some amazing memories and some good exercise. And I woke up like 3 this morning having a pop Motrin. It was so good exercise that it was worth it, though. It was totally worth it.
Yeah, that's a great point, and you're so right. And I do this thing where I say, okay, I got to have 100,000 words by June 1st. I need to write 1,500 words a day, 4 days
Mhm.
a week. And if I don't hit that goal, then I'm like, oh, I'm falling behind. And so it motivates me.
Right.
But at the same time, what I've been doing now is I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna move a little slower in the morning, and if I get 800 words, that's success. If I get 500 words today,
Yeah.
that's success. And to not stress over, this book will be done when it's done. It'll be
Right.
fine. So ideally though, I'm going to publish a Space Warfare Group book number 3.
Hmm.
Um, and I'm going to start Hank number 2, probably late summer, early fall.
Okay.
Yep. And then I'll probably I have these other things, which I don't know if you're aware of yet. But I've got these little tiny mini paperbacks that I'm doing.
The mission briefs,
The mission
right?
briefs.
Yes, it's on
Yep.
my list. The things to make sure we talk about before the end. Yes.
Yeah. So these are episodic. When there'll be 5 of them total. I have 3 written. I just need to edit them and get them done. This is a sample. They're
Are they
short.
like
They're like
short story novellas or?
they are episodes to a single story. So they're like short stories that are just episodes of one. So when it's
Gotcha.
all done, it'll be like a 50,000 word novel,
Okay.
but they're coming out in episodes. And they'll only be available in these mini paperbacks, which
Okay.
are like, this one's like 75 pages, but I really love it. I mean, this is my 5x8 novella, and you can see how small that is.
Oh,
It's
interesting.
just such a cool, yeah,
Huh.
it's just so tiny. So I call them mini paperbacks,
Yeah.
and they're going to be fun, and they'll all have bright colors, and they'll be part 1 through 5.
Okay.
And so those will come out this year too. I'll get parts 1, 2, and 3 published, and then I have to write parts 4, 5, and then if there's a 6th part, those could end up trickling out into 2025.
That's awesome. I love
Yeah,
the zeal. I love the way you're pushing yourself, and so that's to be applauded. So keep doing it, my friend. Keep doing it.
thank you. Likewise.
So
Yeah.
I want to end with the question I've in some form asked everyone so far, and since you're a philosopher in some ways and a pastor, I'm interested to see what your answer will be. I think we can come to an agreement that life is really like a book. Uh, you're going to have a first page and you're going to have a last page. None of us, no matter who they are, know how many pages are going to fill that book. But besides being a father and a husband and a writer and a pastor, you are a very creative person, obviously. So you have the opportunity to write that last page of your book. Kind of here you go. Here's your last question. But what does that last page say for pen name Charles Hack?
Wow. That,
Only slightly deep. But it doesn't
yeah,
have to be deep. It could be I've had some
no.
interesting answers so far.
Yeah, that is a really special question. So, 2 things come to mind. Um, the first one would be in terms of just writing, that people would be inspired by the characters, the struggles, the whatever good news is in the books, whether they are explicitly biblical or just simply encouraging stuff, like in the sci-fi books that have nothing. So to hear people were inspired
Mhm.
from a story would be just a legacy that is wonderful. But what it really comes down to is, for me, for people to see the love of Jesus in me toward them is everything. And so I hope my last page says those 2 things. Yeah.
Well, in some ways, you do get to write that last page. You might not know when it gets to be finished, but you do get to write that last page. So I think that's a good way to do it.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Charles. I appreciate you coming on. And for those people that need to go out and buy, whether it's the Space Warfare Group or the Hank Lynn series and more things to come, what's the easiest way for them to do that? And we'll put it right there in the bottom of the screen.
Awesome. CharlesHack.com, super simple, CharlesHack.com. On that website, you can get access to everything, my trailers, the info on the books, and you can buy autographed books with swag and stuff right there if you want to avoid like Amazon or whatever. It's always great to get an autographed, personalized book with special wrapping and stuff. So
Absolutely.
yeah, and there's also an email contact thing in there too. I love hearing from people. I'm sure you do as well. It's nothing better than to hear from a reader or somebody who saw a podcast. So that's the place to find me. And then I'm on all the socials right now. I spend most of my time on Instagram and
Mhm.
on I'm starting to do Twitter. I hate it, but I'm there.
Yeah, that's about the common thing. So, well, folks, go support Charles, get a copy of his book, and then send him a message, let him know what you thought about it. But thanks for coming on.
Thanks, Eric. Take care, man.
You too.